There are many places in Israel that you can go that are the sites of biblical stories, as you can probably imagine. One of these places is Mount Gilboa. Shalom, my friends. It's Akiva Gersh with Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, want to keep the conversation going, please do so below in the comments. Mount Gilboa is a mountain in the beginning of the north of Israel, not too far from the Sea of Galilee, a gorgeous mountain range that you can look northwards from and see the gorgeous valleys of the Jezreel Valley down below in front of you, as well as another beautiful mountain and site of biblical stories, Mount Tabor. Now, when you're on Mount Gilboa, besides the beauty and besides the nature and besides just the great experience of hiking in a beautiful place like this, you can stop, you can take out your Tanakh, your Hebrew Bible, and you can read stories that literally took place, happened right there on that spot. There are stories from the times of the judges. There's a story of Gideon, right, the judge, who went to battle right down below in the Jezreel Valley. You have the story of Saul, the first king of Israel. We'll get there in a second, but I want to tell you a more modern day story that relates to these two stories. During the 1930s, during the British Mandate Palestine, when there were many Arab riots against the Jews here in Israel, trying to prevent the creation of a Jewish state, there was a British officer named Ort Windgate. And he loved the Jews and he loved Zionism. And he took it upon himself to train the Jews to be able to fight against these Arab riots. He felt like they weren't ready, they weren't well equipped. They weren't equipped enough to fight against these rioters. And so he took a small group of Jewish fighters and trained them to be elite fighters. And one of the places he took them to was Mount Gilboa. And they were training, they were hiking, they were out there on the land, on the mountain. And at some point, they took a little coffee break, like Israelis like to do. This is pre-Israel, but still they had the Israeli mentality. And he didn't sit down to drink coffee. He took out his Bible that he always had with him. And he's standing on Mount Gilboa and he's looking down below at the Jezreel Valley. And all of a sudden, he was known for his eccentric behavior. He starts screaming. And the Jewish fighters who were with him thought something happened. Maybe somebody was coming to attack them. And they stood up and they just saw Ort Wingate screaming into the wind, screaming into the distance. And he said, Saul, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? I can't believe you did that. And they're all like, who is he talking to? Right? And basically he was screaming at King Saul from thousands of years ago. And he started saying, you should have done like Gideon. You should have done like Gideon, attacked at nighttime. What were you thinking? I can't believe you did that. Ort Wingate knew the Bible so well, loved the Bible so well. He wasn't Jewish, right? He was Christian. And he loved the Bible so much. And for him to be in this place where this story took place was like a dream come true for him. But he was also so upset because he wanted to tell, as a military expert that he was, he wished he can go back in time and give Saul a different plan for what he did in the fight that he was fighting there in that spot. And for him, the Bible came alive in this place. Right, the story was not only real, but it was as if it was just happening, right there in front of him, right. And when you go to Mount Gilboa and you look down below at the Jezreel Valley, you know that were many ancient battles that took place in ancient times between the Israelites and many of their enemies, including in the time period of Gideon, the judge. Right, but what Mount Gilboa is most famous for is the last moments of King Saul. Right, he was already told through a prophecy that his kingship was going to come to an end. He was told by Samuel that he was not going to be king much longer. And his end was met on Mount Gilboa. He was fighting the Philistines, and the Israelite camp and the Philistine camp was down below in the Jezreel Valley. And Saul came up the mountain, fleeing with his sword bearer. And he asked right then and there on the mountain, he asked his sword bearer to basically take his life. He knew that he was going to be captured and that he didn't want to be taken by his enemies. And the sword bearer was like, how can I possibly do such a thing to kill the anointed one of God? No way, I can't do that. So Saul took his sword and he fell on it, as we learn, and he killed himself. And when the sword bearer saw that, he too took his life right there on the mountaintop. And that was the end of the first kingship of Israel. That was the end of the life of the first king of Israel. Shortly after that, the Philistines did come, and they saw Saul dead. They cut off his head, and they took it and they hung it on the gate of nearby Beit Shan, not too far from where King Saul's life came to an end. And when you go to Mount Gilboa, you go for a beautiful hike, you enjoy a nice day, and you also connect to very, very deep history. In that sense, some challenging history, right? At the end of the first kingship of Israel, when David, King David, who would soon become King David after that, when he heard about this, even though King Saul, made his life very, very difficult and ran after him and pursued him greatly, he wept. He wept and he wrote a lament for King Saul. And in his lament, in his poem, he said, "O Gilboa," basically. He said, "Wow, you should be cursed for having been the spot on which King Saul's life came to an end." And there's one part of the mountain in modern day times called Katef Shaul, the shoulder of Saul, that is treeless. There's all these trees all over the mountain. There's this one bare spot that has no growth, no trees. And many people look at that as the fulfillment of King David's curse as a result of Mount Gilboa being the site of where King Saul's life came to an end. So it's a very strong example, a really great and classic example of how in Israel you can go for a hike to enjoy a nice day out, and at the same time connect to very, very ancient Jewish history. All the best, my friends, and be well.